I'm Elizabeth Oldfield, and I would love to invite you to our next The Sacred Live podcast recording with Caitlin Moran. It's going to be on May the 6th in a beautiful, intimate venue in central London. And we'll be talking to Caitlin about her career as a Times columnist, her screenplays, her books, her deep values, her life, and particularly this topic that she's written on most regularly: women, men, and how we might understand each other across these divides. I really look forward to seeing lots of you there.
Why do you love sport, and what role does it play in our national life?
If you are embodied in this world, the idea that you can compete and you can compare and contrast is an amazing gift.
Your mum shows up when you're about 15 for the first time. How much did that feel like a fork in the road, or was it just too late by then?
I have forgiven my mum because I know she was following orders and she was doing what was right in her sight at that time. And she was only a young woman.
Hello and welcome to The Sacred. My name is Elizabeth Oldfield, and this is a podcast about the deep values of the people shaping the public conversation. My guest today is Kriss Akabusi. Kriss is a multi-record-breaking, multi-Olympic medal-winning track and field athlete. And since he retired from athletics, he has been a broadcaster and motivational speaker. I hope you enjoy listening. Kriss, we are going to go deep early on with a question that people don't get asked a lot. And it's really trying to get at your deep, abiding values, but you can take it in whatever direction you like. What is sacred to you?
Yeah, it's a very nice question. And first and foremost, I would say that what is sacred to me is the actual realization that I am here in the world. That in itself, to have this period of consciousness, but not only consciousness, but to be aware of that conscious activity is sacred to me. And therefore, in the busyness of being thrown into conscious awareness, the sacred spots come either in silence and solitude, or alternatively, to be so engaged in something that the sense of separateness of me and you, me and thou, me and the panoply of the environment that I'm immersed in become one.
Oh gosh, I just want to sit with that for a minute and chew on it. I feel called into slowing down. Maybe we can circle back to it in terms of spiritual practice, but I would really love to hear a bit about your childhood, and particularly any big ideas that were in the air, political, religious, philosophical. Just paint me a picture of your kind of primary school age years.
So I was born in 1958, and one of the things that I was always aware of was the chance we had at school. This is the United Kingdom, London, about 4 or 6. We won the war in 1944. We won the war in 1944. And there was a real sense as a young Brit that our liberty and liberation was due to those who'd laid down their lives a couple of decades ago. And that's a scary thing for me now, is that, you know, when we were singing those songs in a playground, it was ancient history. But now, as I am in my 7th decade, I realise that's just around the road. That actually that was, that was just like the turn of the century, this 21st century. How close to proximity. And even though we chanted that, I didn't realise the power of those words that we were saying, because in a way we were honouring our immediate ancestors. So that was a real powerful thing for me, is that we were. I mean, I'm a late baby boomer, but really we were just out of the war. 20 years, just out of the war.
Yeah.
For us now in a peacetime, we in the West have had peace for 70 years. But back then it was real vibrant. We'd only just come out of it. So that was a real big sense of being in the world.
I love that. I love that sense that the stories of the ancestors and a sense of actually what we owe them was really live for you. I'd love also to hear about this context and listening and reading about you and to you. I'm realizing there's a key piece of history in your story that I didn't know much about, and a lot of people don't know about what was happening in Nigeria around that time, because you were born here, you lived here till you were 4 with your parents, and then they went back to Nigeria. What were they up to? What were they doing?
So both my parents were young students that come here to study. My father, international law and economics at London School of Economics. My mother went to the maternity up in Blackburn Hospital, and they were young students, got scholarships from the different villages, met each other on the boat from Ghana to here, fell in love, or fell in lust, one of the two, and I was a result of that union. And a couple of years later, my brother came along, my junior brother, and we weren't supposed to be here. They were supposed to be here for a reason. Once they finished their studies, they took advantage of the British passport that we had. But my brother and I were born in the United Kingdom. And something called private fostering. We were fostered out to families who, it was basically like an advert in papers. We had mixed experiences there. And then lost contact with mum and dad in 1966-67 because there was a war, a massive war on the African continent, Nigeria in particular, civil war between the Biafrans, which is my tribe, and bear in mind there's 250 different tribes, but 4 major tribes in Nigeria. Biafran war, lost context. Again, people of a certain age will remember the first pictures of children with flies in their eyes, extended stomachs, very, very frail, and they were beamed live onto TV screens. Well, they were my people. I didn't really resonate with them because I was living in the United Kingdom at the time, going to school singing We Won the War in 1944. But yeah, that was the backdrop of my time in care.
And they went back because there was, as I was reading and listening about it, I hope this is not a stupid thing to say, but what was running through my head was almost the Hamilton soundtrack. This sense of a big dream of the building a new country, right? Of being able to create a nation, and your parents saw that as a calling and a vocation and something important work they could do while you were being looked after in the UK.
100%, Elizabeth. 100%. For a long while I felt they were irresponsible, but actually no, they were responsible. They were responding to the calling to build a nation. Nigeria was going to be the gateway to Africa. It was going to be part of the G34. It was going to be as vibrant, and it was a wealthy economy. And they took seriously the charge of taking over from the colonialists and building this country. And as one was going into law, the other one was going into medicine. And rather than seeing the children as a sacrifice to that calling, we were part of that endemic process where we were going to be the first cohort then of Nigerians who would come from the UK, have been born, bred, buttered, indoctrinated and educated in that European system to build on the foundations that they were going to lay. So it was a real big, massive goal, a mega goal.
Yeah, it's been really illuminating to me to read a bit about that history and kind of the story that was going on. And then the sadness of the fact that then there was a war and those great hopes were somewhat dashed. And the consequences for you is that fostering wasn't available anymore and you ended up in a children's home. And we talk about these, care experienced people, this very formal policy language, right, about what it might mean, But I'd love to just, if it's not too tender, to just hear a little bit about what that experience meant to you.
So being in a children's home in the first instance was a saving grace because there was order, structure, a sense of safety. I now realise actually we was far from safe in a children's home. But at the time, as a young kid, I had a sense of safety. We had a couple, prior to the children's home, a couple of very, very severely abusive experiences. You know, you got a couple of black boys out of their depth in a home with absolutely no checks and balances, nobody taking care of them. And there was physical abuse, sexual abuse, all sorts of abuses, emotional, psychological abuse. So the moment that we were put on a train and found by the police and then sent to care, there was a sense of order, a sense of safe and security. Of course, you know, it's institutionalized, so it's not a family. It's not a family. You know, got 20 boys and girls of different ages and groups and sizes and ethnicities, different cultures, colours, creeds. So it's not a family. And that brings its own awkwardness, because when you go out into the world, you're quite clearly a bunch of misfits. You don't all look the same, sound the same. But there was order in that chaos. There was order in that chaos. But, you know, recently I found out there was lots of abuse going on in the children's home. Fortunately, I didn't experience too much of it. I could tell a couple of stories, but I don't know if it's the right medium. But some of the girls, I mean, were sexually abused in the children's home and by the parents, by the sort of de facto uncles and aunties, their parents, their corporate parent. So, I've had a meeting recently with one of the girls, and you realise, gosh, even there, where I thought you were safe, no, you're out of the frying pan and chucked into the fire. Oh, it's tough. It's a tough one. But, you know, children, or Keezy, as I was then, you're very resilient. You block out stuff that are going on that doesn't fit into the narrative that you need in order to survive the trauma and the experience.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. And if at any point I'm asking you things that you're just like, nope, don't want to talk about that today, I very much respect the boundary on that.
You're very kind,
because it's not, you know, it's not light stuff to be asking you to be thinking about. You have spoken a bit about crying for your mum every night for years and years and years.
Yeah.
And it's something that happened to you when you were about 12 that was a real turning point in your life. Would you tell me a bit more about it?
Yeah. So I was incontinent. I wet the bed every day, every night, and I cried every night myself to sleep. I used to say a little prayer for my mum, and basically the refrain was, I want my mummy, I want my mummy, I want my mummy. And then I got to 12, and, you know, I remember it today, as if it was today. I was in the dormitory. I was crying myself to sleep. And all of a sudden, I said to myself, this is ridiculous. And I got up out of bed, past the other boys, along the corridor, down the steps, across the landing, down the corridor, under the warden's office, into the playroom, into the garden, followed the paving, and there was this great big weeping willow. And I shouted to the willow, I want my mummy, I want my mummy, I want my mummy. And then, this is a little bit of woo-woo, but the tree spoke to me. And the tree said, Mummy isn't coming. And you've got to be enough. Mummy isn't coming. You've got to be enough. And in that moment, the scales fell from my eyes. You're on your own. Get on with it. I had industrial language at the time. I flicked the V's to my mum and my dad. And all of the things they told me I had to do, be responsible, work hard, do your studies, become a doctor, a barrister, a solicitor, I flicked the V's and decided to mess about. And that's when I just became a very naughty boy at school.
How do you, this is my kind of like spiritual, metaphysical curiosity. How do you make sense of what happened there now? Or do you just not let it be weird?
No. I don't let it be weird. I think it was a very important transitional moment of and a rite of passage of taking responsibility for your life. And although we see children in society, we see people at 12, 13 as children, actually in other societies you are becoming an adult. And although I was obviously very, very mature, it was me taking responsibility. You can't keep crying for mummy. No, it's a very important intervention. And, some people talk about God, the universe. I don't care what language you use, but a very important intervention where the universe communicated to me through nature and the tree, but it seemed audible to me, but nature and the tree, and saying, giving you the command, get on with it. Stop this self-pity. Stop this crying. Get on with it. And with it came the skill set that I've used all my life of letting go.
It's interesting that it's around the age that a lot of cultures have initiation rituals, right? Bar mitzvahs or bat mitzvahs or confirmations or these transitions from childhood into adulthood that I think our British culture doesn't really have anymore. And maybe you're making me think we really need them.
Oh, 100%, yeah. I do more on the idea that in the United Kingdom, traditionally, we don't have set rites of passage that actually delineate different phases of your life. 18 doesn't mean anything anymore. 21 doesn't mean anything anymore. But these are serious steps in maturity, in owning the experience, your sojourn through life.
Yeah. And so you're sort of thrust into a new phase of laughing and clowning and feeling like you need to take ownership of your own life. And then your mum shows up when you're about 15, right, for the first time and asks you to go back to Nigeria. How much did that feel like, I don't mean a temptation, like a real choice, a fork in the road, or was it just too late by then?
Oh, 100% way too late by then, Elizabeth. Absolutely no chance. By then, I was a North London boy, 2 Fs in North, and I was absolutely having nothing to do with Nigeria. I was frightened. By then, I didn't understand the different tribes. I thought I was going to have scars put over my face, which is not the Igbo tribe. It's much more than the Yoruba tribe, which is one of the major tribes in Nigeria. I thought I was going to have scars all over my face. I didn't like I remember when my mum, I was playing football in the garden with all the other boys, and we used to call them uncles and aunties. They told me that mum was coming. She was coming that afternoon, and she was unmistakable. This great, big, patterned gear, yellow, red, black, just typical African cloth. She comes past the garden fence into the driveway, gets welcomed into the office, and they oh, your mum's here. I just blanked it. And it took them half an hour to get me in to see my mum. And when I got into the office, the uncles are there, my mum's in the corner. Oh, well, here, Keezy, this is your mum. I mean, I can say the word mum now, but even then, the word mum was alien. It was like gravel in my mouth. I couldn't say the word mum. It just didn't sound right, didn't feel right, didn't taste right. Is your mum? I said, oh. And I thought, well, then they said, well, Keezy, say something. I said, have you got any sweets? That's all I could say, because all the other children, when their mums came, mums had sweets and stuff. So I thought, oh, okay, well, have you got any sweets? And yeah, it was, in fact, mums for me is the mothers of my children. I still find it very difficult to see my mum as a mummy. I know she was my mother. I know she brought me into the world. And I have in some ways, sort of, I think I got over the trauma, but no, it was just so alien. There was just no way. There was no connection to, you've got children and 100%, you are the most important person in your children's life. And when the word mummy is probably next to godness. It's the one thing that you feel safe, secure, unconditional love. No, it had nothing to do with me and my mouth or my ken.
Did you ever get a chance to talk to her about sort of why and what that was like for her?
So in my older age, I've now got a perspective. First of all, Mum was very young when she had me. She was 22. She was a very young girl. A very young girl doing what she felt was right, because in a patriarchal system, her husband had told her this was the thing to do. And she, as an obedient wife, which I know many Europeans won't understand, but as an obedient wife, did what her husband told her to do. And it made sense. I can understand now. If you're going to build a nation, blah, 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 there are sacrifices you've got to make. And sacrifice is something that people don't like to hear, but she made a sacrifice. So I can understand that logically, rationally, what my mother was going through. But the challenge was that when she did that, all culture, all customs, all sense of belonging to, not all sense of belonging to Nigeria, because there is still a sense of belonging to Nigeria, but what that meant, tradition, what that meant and how it impacted me, that was gone. And so when I saw her, I didn't identify with her. And before she died, I never really identified with her. There was a completely different way of seeing things when you come from a developing world and this Western world that we live in. So, for example, I would always say to my mum that the gifts that I can shower upon you come with you first relating and getting to understand me. But in my mother and father sense, the showering of love, affection, connection would come once the gifts were showered. So two different ways of approaching the same thing. So I never got to know my mother, never got to know my father, I buried them both. And so everything post then is retrospective. But I do say, and I do acknowledge that my whole life is a polemic against what happened in my formative years. I do recognise how that impacted me. But I have forgiven my mum and to a lesser degree my dad, but my mum, because I know she was following the orders and she was doing what was right in her sight at that time. And she was only a young woman.
Yeah. Is it around that time that you changed your name?
Yeah, I changed my name when I was 16. We had to leave the children's home. And I was very scared at that stage because although I'd had this big bravado, Keezy, walking with a limp in the playground, messing around with all the boys and girls and being a daredevil and getting the cane and all that bravado business, deep down, there was a very...
cane?
Oh, yeah, we've got the cane. Of course, we've got the cane. Listen, wow. That's so funny. Yeah,
you're not that old. Come on.
Yes, of course I've got the cane. You got the cane in the 60s and 70s. Absolutely.
Wow.
Yeah, of course I got the cane. And it was a badge of honour for me to get the cane. All the other kids would be, so, do you see Keezy? Yeah, I'll go and get the cane. Absolutely, no problems.
But in spite of that front.
Yeah, I was a scared little boy, really. And when the realisation was I had to leave the children's home, I had to leave the school, I had to go in the big bad world, get a bed sit, live in Tottenham, N19. Absolutely. And this is, again, again, people who read the Bible, God can speak in very small voices. I don't know how the universe spoke to me, but I knew I could not go and take care of myself in London. I was going to be in trouble. I would have been in big trouble. Easily led. I would have been in the fall guy. And one of the uncles in the army, one of the uncles in the children's home had been in the army. He was a war signaller. So I went to the careers office decided to join the Royal Signals, became a data telegraphist, couldn't spell the word data telegraphy, but it sounded great, it sounded sexy. You're going to be in a mobile comm centre, not out there digging trenches. They wanted me to dig trenches, but anyway, I got my way. And that was my saving grace. I was institutionalized. So, whereas I was a duffer at school, always getting in trouble, when you joined the army, I knew how to do my hospital turns in my bed, my bed blocks, all of that stuff we'd done in the children's home. So I was ahead of the curve. And like at night time, they were the ones who were weeping and sobbing and missing their mum. Me, no problems.
You've done all that.
I've done all that. I'm in a bedroom with 6 other boys. Done all that. I'm in a community shower block. Been there, done that. So no problem. I'm ahead of the curve.
Yeah. It's interesting, isn't it? I think I am hearing there's been a few people on this series who've talked about the army or boarding school, or in it, like that that for some people, temperaments, backgrounds, lives, maybe particularly young men, might be a generalization. Actually, those situations where there's order and there's discipline and there's structure, and you know what you're doing, and you know what's going to happen next, that actually for some people they're really life-giving, right? And that's not necessarily the story we hear about them.
Yeah, I certainly think for particular types of males, most definitely. I was going into a masculine world. The army then was populated by men. There was an infrastructure. There was a hierarchy. There were rules. There were order. There was boundaries. There was a very obvious structure to transcend and to escalate. It was actually quite safe and satisfying.
It sounds like you really thrived, right? And you both did a good job, and it's where your kind of sporting prowess was discovered.
Absolutely, 100%, exactly that. If I hadn't joined the army, it wouldn't have met Sergeant Mackenzie, and Sergeant Mackenzie was a troop sergeant, but also an army athletics officer. And he was able to spot something that hadn't been seen at school, not because I didn't have it at school, but because I was ill-disciplined at school. I was 10 sheets to the wind at school. I never turned up for training at school. But in the army, if you put your name down to do sports, you've got to turn up to do sports. And when you turn up to do sports, you actually do the training for that sport. And it became readily identifiable to Sergeant Mackenzie that I had a skill set hitherto unknown. I could run a bit.
You were incredibly fast.
They said, he can run like the wind. Yeah, he can run like the wind. Yeah, it was great. A year within that, I was the Army Junior Champion. 5 years later, I'm a Olympic silver medalist. Go figure.
Yeah. How did it change you as a person to discover that you were world-class standard at something?
Yeah, most definitely gave me a sense of self, a sense of purpose, a sense of being able to contribute, to be able to master something, if I say self-esteem, to be able to hold my head up high, not for being a clown, but for being an achiever. And it gives you something to work towards. Yeah, again, a sense of purpose, meaning, a reason for being. Yeah, there's many, many blessings for that experience. Many blessings indeed.
If you're willing, I'd love you to tell the story really of that 1991 relay race, because there's something incredibly powerful in your experiences in that. And I know you've spoken about it a little bit, but I would love our listeners to really hear what happened. For those of us who, I was definitely born, but lots of people who weren't even born.
Well, so I've been in the British team now for 8 years, and they grew up around us, a group of real good quarter milers. Roger Black, we call him Roger Pretty Boy Black, Derek Redmond, John Reedus was seconded into our team. And in 1991, we went to the World Championship to take on the mighty Americans. They had been unbeaten for 20-odd years. And there was an elite athlete called Michael Johnson who hadn't made their team because they had a very strict first past the post team. And he was took all the superlatives for him. But anyway, we went into that event, And not before the final, Roger Black and I were sharing the same room, and we're talking about the event, and we recognised that this was the opportunity that we'd often talked about, an opportunity to take on the Americans. But in order to do so, we had to change our order. And the typical order of the 4x4 relay, and anybody who's a sprinter, and even now, if you ask a question in a relay team, where does the best man go? Most people, even today, will say the best person in a relay team goes where? Where would you, if you was one had a relay team, where do you put the best man? Come on,
I'm about to reveal my high levels of sports ignorance, but last?
Yes!
Yeah! Point to me!
Check Elizabeth out. Top coach. Yes, of course. Most athletes, most schools, you put your best man last because you think that, if there's any deficit, he or she's going to make it up, or if they're in the lead, no one's going to overtake them. But what we recognise by looking over the annals of history, the reasons the Americans, who were the best team in the world, won is because they had so many people who could run world-class performances that on the first leg, they opened up a gap for 6-7 metres. Second leg, 2 or 3 more. Third leg, 50 metres clear. On the last leg, it didn't matter how good you were, you couldn't beat the mighty Americans. So Roger Black, who was our best guy at the time, we decided that what we would do is we would reverse that paradigm. We would shift the resources so that the best guy would be first, second best would be second, third best would be third, and then myself as a hurdler would be last. And what that did was change the dynamic of the race. And once it started happening, it was amazing. Because now you've got the Americans thinking what's going on, not understanding the strategy.
This isn't how this usually goes.
This is not how it goes. You're on their jockstrap. The baton gets passed to me just on the jockstrap of the American world champion. But he's now got something to think about. He's got, something called a peloton effect. I'm behind him in his lee side. He's breaking all of the wind. He's having, all I've got to think about is when I'm going to strike. Right around the last turn, I give it gas. I go past him. He struggles to get close to me, but it was all over, baby, all over. It was an amazing experience. It was trust. It was faith. It was belief. Daring to be different. And it's amazing when you see that sort of plan unfolding. Because by the time the baton gets to me, I've got ultimate belief in our strategy that we come up together with. John Regis, who ran our third leg, was a 200-metre runner. So it doesn't run 400s, but we trusted him to deliver on that day. Amazing experience.
I'm going to ask a really unprofound question. What does right on the jock strap mean? Because it's given me slightly odd images.
That's a great question. So I don't know if they do it today, but when you were an athlete back in the day, you used to wear a jock strap. A jock strap is an undergarment that keeps your meat in bed. It's like a bra
for boys, right?
Yeah. It's a bra for boys. Exactly. It keeps your meat in bed intact and away from the business down there. So exactly, it's a bra for boys. And so what you want to be is you want to be on top of that jock strap because that's as close as you get.
Right. Okay, so it's about where the hurdle... not the hurdle. See, this is just embarrassing.
Yeah,
it's where the thing gets past the baton. That's the word.
Yeah. No. So the baton is my hand. The jock strap is on the nether regions, but it's a euphemism for being so close that you could be inside a jock strap. So that's what I was saying. Is that when they gave me the baton, I just jumped on his jock strap. He knew that I was there. He knew that. Unopposed to has normally they got a free run because they're 15 metres down the track. No, he's got something to think about. I'm on his shoulder. This
is a good tee up for my next question because I have loved preparing to interview you and listening to what you've said, and it's just been stimulating. I've learned a lot, and I've also been quite embarrassed because I am the least sporting person of anyone I've ever met. My husband and I joke, he goes to the pub to watch football and I say, how was the sportsing? Did one group of people sports harder than the other? Who sports the best? Which is what I feel like all sporting commentary is. And I went to the Olympics and I read a novel because I got bored. But I feel like it's a deficit in me, right? I feel there is like something I don't fully understand, and I'm seeking to understand, because lots of people I love and respect see such meaningfulness and power and beauty in sport. So I was hoping you could help me. Tell me why do you love sport, and what do you think, what role does it play in our national life? Why is it important? Assuming that you think it is. Maybe you don't.
Oh, yeah. Oh, what a great question. Look, so in the first instance, sport, if you are embodied in this world physically, and we are embodied in different ways, but if you are embodied physically, the idea that you can contrast and compare this beautiful body that you have been given against another human being, men against men, women against women, but you can compete and you can compare and contrast, is an amazing gift. And then the idea that in order to compete, compare and contrast against another, I have to discipline. I have to buffet, shape, hone, chisel, put through the furnace, learn to lose in order to win. That you are consequential, committed, dedicated. It's a beautiful thing to realize it's dark outside. I don't want to get outside, but you're going to go outside. And you put this beautiful framework through its paces. And you see with awe and wonder what this thing can do. And then you place it into an environment where the rules and regulations were not ordained by you. There is a statute book, a structure, a canon. This is how you operate this body in this field, in this discipline against these people. And there's a clarion call. At this time in a calendar, all of you who have been dedicated, committed, and disciplined to honing this body, turn up and let's see who's best. And then turning up and seeing the chiseled, bronze, articulate, bright, brave lions and competitors, and looking them in the eye and saying, I'm ready for you. And then filtering through and going into the auditorium, and there are magnified hundreds of thousands, or tens of thousands, should I say, people looking to see your work and handiwork over the last year. Oh my God, there is nothing like it. There is absolutely nothing like it. And you know what? You can take 4, 6 years for that one moment in the sunshine. Do or die. There is no try. It is awesome experience. One I will never, ever forget. I know that guy is dead, but that guy has fed me so much craft, belief, understanding. You know, this body of ours, and when I say the body, I just don't mean the physical mind, body, spirit. We can do phenomenal things. Phenomenal things. I was Keezy from the children's home, Olympic champion, Olympic silver medalist, world champion, European champion, continental champion 15 years later. All inspiring.
Okay, that helps. Yeah, it really does. I think because you've helped me understand the aesthetic appeal of it, actually.
Yeah.
Words like awe and wonder are really my jam. And the meaningfulness of just what can this body do? And
well, and also, but also it is a spiritual practice. And at the beginning, you asked me about sacred, and I talked about solitude and being alone. But on the other side, this total engagement. And one of the times European Championships. It was in the first round, and I came out the turn, the first bend, and down the back straight, and I lost myself in the aura of the occasion. And all of a sudden, there was no me, there was no track, there was no crowd, there was no tunnel system, there was no other athletes. I was just lifted up into this other dimension. And it just felt like cheating. Now, when I went round the back straight and the second bend, and it was just effortless. And there's a guy called Mahali, and he wrote a book called Flow. And I attribute that experience to flow. I was in flow of the universe. All of my molecules in my body just synthesized with all of the molecules that were in that one verse at a time. And that is a height of spirituality. If you listen to any sort of spiritual gurus, and they go into the mountains and they become one with the ether. Sport can do that.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay, now I need to start doing some sport. That's.
Yay!
But not ball sports, because I cannot catch or throw to save my life. Okay. I'd love you to say a little bit more about spirituality. How much has it been a kind of evolving thing? Has it always been part of your life? How would you describe it now?
Yeah, that's most definitely an evolving thing. I'm not today where I once was, where I was organised and quite sure about my faith. So traditional children's home, you get carted off to school, and I pretend I've got a deep voice, and I sort of mess about when I'm singing the songs. Or when, all things bright and beautiful in the school, when you do school assembly, all things bright and beautiful, you pretend. But the great thing
imagine.
But I tell you what, the great thing about back then, which I think we lose today, we live in a multicultural society, I know where we've gone, but when I was at school in the 60s and 70s, and we won the war in 1944, there was a very definite sense that we were British, and we were Christians, and we had Christian hymns. You make of that what you will. But what happened was, because I had that inculcation, when I was floundering for life in my 20s, those spiritual songs and those prayers and the Lord's Prayer and the anecdotes about Jesus, the Nazarene, and all the Good Shepherd, they came back into play. So that when I was really I was struggling with life and some of the habits that I developed and my coping strategies, and I said a prayer. I mean, I can't go into all, but I said a prayer. I'd read a little bit of the Bible, and I said a prayer, and I said, okay, Jesus, if you are out there, come and speak to me. April the 13th, 1987, Jesus come rushing into my life. I'm doing that. He didn't hit me, but he hit me with the full force of his presence. And I knew then Jesus had spoken to me, and I went down the track and I saw Roger Black and Edwin Moses, world-class athlete, Dave Thompson, world-class. I met Jesus. Akabusi, you on drugs, get out of here. But I had a real encounter that time. I had a real encounter. And then I got onto the sort of evangelical Christian trip. And for about 10 years, I was full-on evangelical, fundamentalist Christian. And then I got really, because again, I'm that obsessive compulsive, and I got really into it. And then I was married at the time, I started condemning my wife. You're going to hell, you got to come to church. I started trying to drag the kicking and screaming into the church. And my pastor said, that's not the way to win souls, son. And but the thing is, although I understand what my pastor was saying, it was actually the hook that allowed me to get back out of my sort of fundamental faith. Because I thought to myself, okay, if I can't trust the words, if I can't trust the words about winning souls and about, my wife going to hell, and what else is up for grabs? That's just an excuse. Anyway, I'm using it to say that then I fell away and I've got into sort of existentialism. That's really where I'm at right now. And I would look for the existential Jesus. So whereas I was very fundamentalist, a lot of the creeds I held for dear in the 80s and 90s, I've let go of now. I still sense my spirituality. I can never, ever, 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 ever deny what happened to me on the 13th of April, 1987. I cannot deny that, like I can't deny I'm talking to you. But a lot of the paraphernalia that have been around it, I have let go, and I still have an assurance of my faith. And I know the guy who was converted at 87 will say, "You're going to hell, son. You're an apostate. You're backslidden." I know he would, but I've actually got more faith than he has in God, and I would say the Lord Jesus Christ. So I don't see him in that light anymore. But I would say I've got more faith in him because I take for a surety as far as the east is from the west. My hand, I've got you in my hand, and no one can cast out. When I transition from this stage, fully fleshed, to God, if he says to me, "Why should I let you into heaven? Because you said so. You said your son." What am I? I'm a little worm. I can't, because I couldn't understand the why, fors, and wherefore. It's your word. I stand on your word. I'm at your seat. So I've got more faith in God now, in the Christian God that I had now, even though I wouldn't profess myself as a Bible-believing, fundamental Christian. I've got more faith now than I had back then.
Yeah. Thank you.
It's weird, isn't it? It's weird. It's weird because I walk by fear. I walk by faith and not by fear. I've absolutely, there's a verse that I still hold on to in Micah. Do justly, love mercy, do justly, and walk humbly with thy God, your one, the one that you have come to meet and know, who knows you from your intimate knitting in the womb. That just walk humbly. You don't need to have the precepts and forceps and rules and regulations and formations. You just walk humbly with the light that's in your eyes. Don't worry, mate. I'll do the rest.
It's such a beautiful verse. I think we're going to come full circle because I've been watching a talk you did at the Oxford Union not that long ago, and you said, you said your full name. I can't remember all of it, but you said I'm Chikize, and you said you were in beautiful Nigerian dress, and that we've heard at that sort of age 16 the rejection of that part of your life. Tell me a bit about why has it become so important to you again?
I'm so thankful that I'm born and bred in the United Kingdom, and I live in a time where it is acceptable to embrace the Penelope and multicultural aspect of the United Kingdom. And whereas when I was a young kid, I felt embarrassed about my African roots and heritage, and it was unacceptable. It was unacceptable there. We were very, very boxed in. I sense a calling. There's so much for me there. And it's inside me anyway. It is inside me. It is inside me. This African man is inside me. And things like my ancestors, I acknowledge my ancestors. And I sense outside of the time frame continuum, we're all in it together. And so I want to acknowledge my tradition, my culture, the things that I let go of. And I've spoken to my children. I've got one that's 40, one's 37, one is 17, one is 14. When I kick the bucket, when I shuffle off the mortal coil, I will be buried in Nigeria. I mean, I hope that at some stage I'll go and have more time in Nigeria. But I will be buried with my forefathers. I'm a person of the world. I love the world I've been brought up in. But I know where my ancestors lie. And it's just, it gives me, don't talk in the general sense, it gives me a more rounded sense of self. I'm unique and wonderfully made. And part of my structure is the African heritage. And I mustn't deny it.
Yeah. I watched a beautiful thing where your daughter was planning your funeral.
Yes.
And that very strange thing to get to go through. What a powerful
Yeah.
piece of TV.
It was a beautiful experience. It was beautiful.
Yeah.
It really was beautiful. And I look at my daughter, and I am really blessed because I know that she will, both my two daughters, well, eldest daughters, will definitely know what the old man want and will deliver on the old man. And that's a real beautiful gift to be given this side of death.
Yeah.
And
not many people get to really think that through.
no, I would really encourage people to think through their death. It's, you know, the fact that you know you die gives you permission to live. The fact that you know that you die gives you permission to live in all of its fullness. And you can tie, you know, the things that I've tied up already, and my girls are 100% clear of what's going to happen to me when this clay stops beating.
Yeah. And on that note, Kriss Akabusi, Keezy, thank you so much for speaking to me on The Sacred.
Bless you, Elizabeth.
Okay, can I just say, this is the interview that has most surprised me, certainly for a while. I, as you heard, not super sportsy, knew who Kriss was, kind of grew up in the generation where he was a famous, highly respected athlete, and then he was on like TV panel shows being funny and lovely, but didn't go into it feeling like there would be so much depth and emotional intelligence and richness, which, to be clear, is just one of my prejudices, right? I want to speak to a range of people of different backgrounds, different perspectives, different professions, and we hadn't had loads of sports people because that is one of my blind spots, and we were addressing that. Oh my goodness, what a fascinating story. What a fascinating man. I so enjoyed that conversation. He said what's sacred to him is consciously aware of being in the world. Ooh, that's a hard thing to remember, isn't it? Like noticing ourselves in this space, in the present moment. It's sort of become a cliche of what sounds like light spirituality and is an incredibly profound practice that I think all of our wisdom traditions call us back to in their contemplative strands. Stop living in the past, stop living in the present. Sufficient unto the day, as Jesus said, give us today our daily bread. What does it mean to be in this day as the gift that is given to us? Not anxious about the future and not obsessing over the past. And it will be easy for someone like Kriss to obsess over the past because what a story. I feel the more I have various people in my life who have adopted, and so I am moving from very ignorant to slightly less ignorant about the experiences of care experienced people is the phrase I'm learning to say of people who grew up in foster care or who were adopted or were in children's homes. And just how far back that puts you in terms of opportunities, right? So if we're talking about equality of opportunity, it is one of the key drivers of people starting with a very, very poor hand in life. You know, the prison population is radically disproportionately people who are care experienced, as is the homeless population. And you can hear from Kriss why that is. You know, he was ejected, age 18, carrying what we would probably explain now as a lot of trauma. And it was only the army scooping him up that, as he said, sort of kept him off the street, stopped him getting involved in criminality. And I don't want to sort of glibly move past the sharp edges of that story. You know, he said, the moment we were put on a train and found by the police, and the little boy crying for his mum every night. And I have to say, you know, I'm thinking a lot about masculinity at the moment, healthy masculinity. And there is something very moving about someone who is, you know, professional athlete, was in the army, being completely open and unapologetic about being a little boy who wept the bed and wept for his mum, the power of that and the tenderness of it and how humanizing it is. I just really want to applaud that. I want to applaud him saying that, because I think that makes it easier for other people to acknowledge what they're carrying, maybe. And finally, it really did do it for me for a minute. I don't know if it's going to properly change my habits around sport, but wow, awe-inspiring. The idea of sport as this like beautiful expression of our bodies. And I feel this about dance. So I think I could probably get there with sport. Maybe they just need better music in the background. And then transcendent experience. For him, it's a spiritual practice. When you run and everything else fades away and you're in flow in the moment. Gorgeous. I'm not going to go for a run, I'll be honest. Right now. But maybe one day. We'll see. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of The Sacred. My name is Elizabeth Oldfield. We'd love you to check out our back catalogue. The real firm commitment in this project is you will not just hear people like you. You will not just hear people you agree with, that we deliberately go looking for a range of voices, political perspectives, metaphysical perspectives, professional perspectives, and that might be uncomfortable sometimes. We are being formed by our information environment to either just listen to people who we already agree with, or to see from a distance people that we don't and be made angry by them. And we're trying to do something different. So I would encourage you, if you're new to us, go listen to some people who both you just know you're going to enjoy listening to, and also some people that you're not sure if you will, and see what happens. Let me know. Our production team are Dan Turner, Amari Ugandran, and Lizzie Harvey, and our music is by Luke Stanley. We are a project of the think tank Theos, and we would love you to go and check out our wider work. You can find me at Substack, morefullyalive.substack.com. Thanks very much for listening.